executive branch of the government here in Pennsylvania was called the Supreme Executive Council of the Commonwealth of PA. Thank God they shortened that up, right? So, how many other states had the same council? Does anybody know?
Up to 13.
3.
3? None. Do you blame them? It was such a long title, right? So nobody else had what we had. Our council was headed by a president and a vice president. And they did that from 1777 to 1790. And then they gave that up. Does anybody know who in today's world would be, what position would be our president and vice president?
Governor.
And?
Lieutenant.
Yes, yes. So I'm going to read some names for you that were our presidents, okay? So the first president, I want to get above that. The first president we had in Pennsylvania was Thomas Wharton Jr. Anybody ever hear of him? Yeah?
Wharton School.
Yep. So he died in office and he was replaced by George Bryan. He was the only one that was not elected. He was just an acting president. The third one was Joseph Reed, followed by William Moore, who was followed by John Dickinson. And by that time, you're up to 1782 to 1785. It was John Dickinson. And the interesting part of that is he was also the president of Delaware when he became the president of the Commonwealth. He didn't give up the Delaware presidency until a year into his Pennsylvania presidency. So I thought that was kind of cool. And of course, he was also the Dickinson College, the law school, all of that all hails from him. The sixth president was Benjamin Franklin, you all know him. And our last one was Thomas Mifflin, who is also hailed as being the first governor. But all of the presidents that served are listed as governors somewhere along the line if they don't tell you about the change in the executive order. So that was pretty cool. So now we're up to speed. We were challenged as a 250 committee to include local folks as much as we could in giving our 250 history. So with that said, how many of you have ever heard the name Pollock? Have you ever heard of Governor Pollock? Okay, so he's from Milton. How about the Hart Ramps? Anybody ever hear of the Hart Ramps? That's a local name. So James Pollock from Milton, and then Governor Hart Ramp is from Norristown. But his relatives are up this way. So first of all, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Governor Pollock. He was born in Milton on September 11th, 1810. He was one of 7 children. He studied at the Milton Classical Academy. Isn't that quite the name? They don't call it that anymore. He received a bachelor's and a master's degree from the College of New Jersey. They don't call that anymore either. It's what we call Princeton today. He studied law with Samuel Hepburn. How many know that name? These are all local names, so it's really cool to throw it all together. He became district attorney in Northumberland County. He was a judge of Court of Common Pleas. In 1837, he married Sarah Hepburn, the daughter of the lawyer that he studied under. And he had 3 sons and 5 daughters. He was elected to Congress in 1844, and he served 3 successive terms. While he was in Congress, he oversaw the Transcontinental Railroad to the Pacific, and because he was a friend of Samuel Morse, he also urged the Congress to fund the first telegraph. He served as governor from 1855 to 1858, and he sought to cut expenses in public transportation. And by doing so, he sold the mainline properties of the Pennsylvania State Works to the PA Railroad. Does anybody have a clue as to what the PA State Works were? Yes.
They were out bankrupting the state.
Yes, yes. So he reduced the state's debt when he sold all that to the railroad. He also established a department to implement the public school legislation. It was called the Normal School Act of 1857. He started the regional teacher training institutions throughout the Commonwealth and chartered the Farmers High School.
Penn State.
Yes, ma'am. That's what we know today as the University of Penn State. Yep. He also developed methods for preventing the collapse of state banks because it was a very tumultuous time in the states. He also purchased the first Pennsylvania Governor's House at 111 South 2nd Street in Harrisburg, where two governors would live. Packer and Curtin would live in that house. And I threw this in as a fun fact because you're talking the mid-1800s. So he didn't approve of drinking, nor did he approve of playing cards. So that was a big thing back then. They were very outspoken about it. Some people thought that it was evil to play cards, so they didn't have anything to do with it. So in 1861, President Abraham Lincoln appointed Governor Pollock had left office, so then he was appointed to be the director of the U.S. Mint. And he served the Mint for 5 years till 1866 and was reappointed by Ulysses S. Grant, who was president at that time in 69. And he moved up to superintendent in the Mint, and who knows what he's famous for? In God We Trust, on the coinage of all of our coins. That was Governor Pollock from Milton. He also served after he left the Mint. He was the naval officer in charge of customs in Philadelphia and served as chief supervisor in 1886 of elections. He was also a trustee of the Lafayette College and a founder and trustee of the Pennsylvania Military College. And he died in 1890. When we were working on this research, all of the things that I listed to you, go back and think about him having 8 kids. They were along for a ride, right? Because he did a lot of stuff. He moved around. Maybe they all stayed stationary in Milton during his time. So that was pretty interesting. That's Governor Pollock, and I'm going to have Denny come tell us about Governor Hartranft.
Well, she's related to this next guy. He
Jenny
would
Wortman.
be Jenny's third cousin 2 times removed. They both descend from Tobias Hederath. Didn't know how to pronounce that name. Of Celsia, who was the immigrant ancestor, arrived in Philly on the ship St. Andrew in 1734. Tobias is Jenny's 5th great-grandfather and the governor's 3rd great-grandfather. So while the name is local, he really wasn't, nonetheless. He was born in New Hanover Township in December 1830, the only child of Samuel and Linda Bucher Hartranft. He attended Marshall College in Pennsylvania and graduated Union College in New York in 1853. In 1854, he married Sally Sebring, and Sally spelled Sallie, the daughter of a judge, and had 6 children. He accomplished all this while studying law and was admitted to the Montgomery County Bar in 1860. He was elected deputy sheriff of Montgomery County, president of the local fire company, captain of the Norris Rifles, a militia company, and a lieutenant colonel in the state militia. During the war, he served with 2 Pennsylvania regiments, being promoted to brigadier general and then major general. He displayed bravery at the Battle of Fredericksburg, commander of brigade at Vicksburg, and is credited with actions that led to the surrender of Petersburg. He earned the Medal of Honor during his service. He was then assigned provost marshal of Washington Arsenal Prison. It was Hartraft's responsibility to signal the executioner to carry out the death by hanging sentence of the 4 Lincoln assassination conspirators. Hartraft resigned his commission and began his political career. He was elected as Auditor General of Penn and served 2 terms. In 1872, he was elected governor, and in 1876, he was elected again. However, he was accused of bribing the leaders of the Molly Maguires to get members to vote for him. Now, I've heard of the Molly Maguires, and I saw the movie and I saw the play. Now I lost my space. He helped improve the western Pennsylvania river commerce and pointed out the emerging and lucrative oil industry. He supported state hospitals for the insane, and he advocated for the municipal reform, and he supported the labor unions. He was also great railroad strikes of 1877. A national movement spread throughout Pennsylvania railroad cities and caused dozens of deaths, millions of dollars in riot damage, and so violent that the governor called the Pennsylvania National Guard to stop the violence. But they were successful, so he called in the federal troops to restore order. Because of the failure of the guards to control the violence, he reformed the state's National Guard system. Henry Hoyt, who was governor after Hartraft, was so impressed he appointed him Major General and Division Commander. After leaving office, he was appointed Postmaster of Philadelphia in 1880. President Rutherford B. Hayes appointed him Collector of the Port of Philadelphia, which gave him a percentage of all goods passing through the port. During this time, he began to gather Hartraft family genealogy, sending letters out to other Hartraft families asking for information. His efforts were placed in the book, The Genealogy Record of the Descendants of the Schweckenfelders by Reverend Balthasar Hebner. John Frederick Hartraft died in October 17, 1889 from kidney failure and pneumonia. His funeral was full of pomp and grandeur. His pallbearers included former President Hayes and former governors of Pennsylvania. More than 5,000 people gathered at Montgomery Cemetery in Norristown for the graveside services. The National Guard fired a salute and played taps as the governor's casket was lowered into the grave. Great in the warfare and excelled also in civil life. Twice the ordained magistrate of a great commonwealth. He so bore himself in the ordinary details of government and into the extraordinary responsibilities of the centennial year that neither the office nor the man suffered discredit. After a life spent in enriching this nation and state, he lies there as he died a poor man. The answer will be
1.
2.
2. Joe Biden, that's right, apparently he was born in Scranton. But for today, we are going to focus on James Buchanan Jr., the 15th President of the U.S. of America. He was born in Cove Gap, Pennsylvania, on 4/23/1791. He never married and had no children. He was a Federalist, 1814 through 1824. He was a Democratic Republican. Now, how can you read that?
Keep going. He was a member of all the parties.
The Democratic Republican, 1824 to 1828, and a Democrat from 1828 on. He served in the Pennsylvania House of Representatives December 6, 1814 to December 2nd, 1816. Under President Andrew Jackson, he served as United States Minister to Russia. Under President Franklin Pierce, he served as the United States Minister to the United Kingdom. 1821 to 1831, he was a member of the United States House of Representatives and a United States Senator from 1834 to 1845. He served as Secretary of the State, 1845 to 1849. Under President James K. Polk, he was known for supporting states' rights. During his tenure, the United States recorded its largest territorial gain in history through the Oregon Treaty and the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which included territory that is now Texas, California, Nevada, New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, and Colorado. During the Mexican-American War, he initially advised against claiming territory south of the Rio Grande, fearing war with Britain and France. However, as the war came to an end, Buchanan changed his mind and argued for the annexation of further territory, arguing that Mexico was to blame for the war and that the compensation negotiated for the American losses was too low. He is hailed as a lifelong bachelor of the White House. He served from 1857 to 1861. Does anyone know what was going on in our nation at the time?
Started the Civil War.
Very good. Started of the Civil War. 1857, Dred Scott decision. 1858, Lincoln-Douglas debates. Completion of the Atlantic Cable. Minnesota was added as a state. 1859, John Brown's raid at Harper's Ferry. Oregon was added as a state. 1860, the Pony Express mail service began. South Carolina succeeds from the Union, and the Confederacy was formed by 11 succeeding states. Southern provincial government was established and Lincoln was inaugurated. Winchester made a repeating rifle. In 1861, Richard J. Gatling made the machine gun, and Kansas was added as a state. He died June 1st, 1868, Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
When we started this whole President's Day event, I did not know by picking local people that Governor Pollock was assigned by Abraham Lincoln to the Mint. I did not know that Governor Hartranft would hang the assassinators of President Lincoln. I did know that James Buchanan was the 15th president. But did you guys know that we actually have the 16th president among us today? I would like to welcome Michael Kinney as our local Lincoln enthusiast. He is going to come out and speak to us, and he will conclude our event for the day.
Thank you. So I'm here in Watsontown to address you all very briefly on the works of Abraham Lincoln from one of the greatest times in our country's history, from 1860 until the departure of Lincoln in 1865. And to set the stage here a little bit, I'll remind you that Abraham Lincoln told us of a story when he was younger, and he was taking a raft down one of the rivers in Kentucky and ended up in the Mississippi River area, where he witnessed one of his first slave trades. And he said it was like holding up a chain of trout, but it was a chain attached to a bunch of slaves, and they would just auction them off almost unheartedly. And later on, during Lincoln's presidency, that would be one of the greatest conflicts in American history. So I brought with me today President Lincoln's first inaugural address to the nation. This is officially before the start of the Civil War, but in the address you will notice that the country and Lincoln himself believes that the Civil War is among us and ready to start at any time. And so to put this in the perspective of Lincoln's timeline, this would be 85 years ago, 165 years ago from today. The first inaugural address was given by Abraham Lincoln on the 4th of March in 1861. Fellow citizens of the United States, in compliance with the custom as old as the government itself, I appear before you to address you briefly and to take in your presence the oath prescribed by the Constitution of the United States, to be taken by the President, quote, before he enters on the execution of his office, unquote. I do not consider it necessary at present for me to discuss those matters of administration about which there is no special anxiety or excitement. Apprehension seems to exist amongst the people of the southern states that by the accession of a republic administration, their property and their peace and personal security are to be endangered. There has never been any reasonable cause. And after the great battle of Gettysburg, the people, the government, and the soldiers requested that Lincoln come dedicate a portion of that field and say something on behalf of Gettysburg. And then after that address, I also have something specifically for us here today. So Lincoln arrived at Gettysburg, at what is now the Gettysburg Cemetery, with the message that 407 years ago, our nation brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who are here, gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it, far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little know, nor long remember, what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government, by the people, for the people, of the people, shall not perish from earth. So the Gettysburg Address, much shorter than the first inaugural address, and Abraham Lincoln's second inaugural address was also much, much shorter than the first inaugural address. If you can imagine, first time being in office, Abraham Lincoln also had to appease the entire nation in order to maybe hopes of getting elected a second time, which he did. But the Gettysburg Address is very powerful, and it has, just a few facets of that address. He's addressing the conflict that's in front of us. He's dedicating the lives that were lost in the Civil War, specifically at Gettysburg, and he's making a call to action. This very Commonwealth, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great enduring test, measuring whether that nation, having survived the fires of civil war, can long survive the quiet passage of time. We are met today not on a great battlefield of conflict, but in a sanctuary of peace. We are met here in Watsontown, a small town in the heart of the Keystone State, to mark the 250th year of our life as people. Lincoln spoke of the brave men, living and dead, who struggled to save the Union. In this town, we remember the sons of this soil, the men of the 131st Regiment, who left the safety of these riverbanks to stand in the breach of their country. But today, it is fitting that we honor the quiet citizens who struggle to keep what those soldiers saved. The soldier protects the house
but it is the citizen who builds it. It is the neighbor, the worker, and the believer who act as the true keystones of this republic. The world will little know nor long remember what we say in this quiet church, but it can never forget what communities like this represent. It is not the marble halls of Washington that hold this nation together. It is the spirit that's found here. It is for us, the living, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work of peace. It is for us to be the mortar that binds this nation, building it stronger, brick by brick, neighbor to neighbor, and heart to heart. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored years we take increased devotion to that cause of unity, that we here highly resolve that the sacrifices of the past were not in vain, that this nation, born in Philadelphia, saved on the fields of Pennsylvania, and sustained by the faithful of Watsontown, shall have a new birth of freedom. And that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth, but shall stand for far more than 250 years more.